look closely at this skull. It's not a casualty of war. It's a meticulously crafted cup made from the head of a 3-year-old child. Welcome to Gough's Cave, England, 14,700 years ago, the site of history's most disturbing true crime scene. Today we are reopening the ultimate cold case. Were our Ice Age ancestors forced into cannibalism just to survive the freezing apocalypse, or did they harbor a terrifying, dark, ritualistic obsession? The truth hidden inside these bones will shatter everything you thought you knew about human nature. Imagine a winter that never ends. The Magdalenian people lived in a world where temperatures plummeted, megafauna died off, and the landscape became an unforgiving frozen wasteland. Survival wasn't a daily struggle, it was an hourly nightmare. Food was so scarce that starvation was the baseline of human existence. From a purely biological standpoint, human flesh is just another source of calories. A single adult human body contains roughly 125,000 calories, enough to keep a small tribe alive through a brutal, week-long blizzard. So the desperation hypothesis makes perfect sense. They ate each other because they had absolutely no other choice. It was either consume the dead or join them in the ice. But here is where the story takes a sinister turn. When forensic anthropologists began examining the remains found in Gough's cave, they noticed something chilling. These weren't the frantic, messy cuts of starving animals tearing at meat in a desperate frenzy. The bones told a story of cold, calculated, and terrifying precision. If we examine the cut marks under a microscope, we see a systematic process. First, the skin was carefully peeled back. Then the muscles were filleted off the bone using sharpened flint tools. Finally, the long bones, the femurs and tibias, were deliberately smashed open to extract the nutrient-rich marrow. This level of methodical dismemberment is terrifyingly familiar to criminal profilers today. When detectives analyze the methodology of a modern serial killer, they look for signatures, actions that go beyond what is strictly necessary to commit the crime. The butchers of Gough's cave exhibited these exact signatures. They weren't just frantically eating to survive, they were processing human bodies with an almost surgical, obsessive dedication. And if they were simply starving, it begs one horrifying question. Why did they take the time to delicately engrave geometric zigzag patterns into the bones of their victims before cracking them open? You don't decorate your food when you're dying of starvation. The engraved bones blow the desperation theory wide open. These zigzag patterns are virtually identical to the artistic carvings they left on cave walls and animal tools. This means the act of processing the human body was treated with the same reverence or the same twisted artistic expression as their most sacred artifacts. We are no longer looking at survival cannibalism. We are stepping into the dark, twisted realm of the ritual. Psychologists who study ritualistic behavior in ancient tribes suggest that consuming the flesh of the dead was a way to absorb their power, their essence, or even their soul. If the victims were fallen enemies, eating them was the ultimate act of dominance and desecration. But if the victims were their own family members, the ritual becomes even more complex and disturbing. Was it a misguided attempt to keep their loved ones with them forever in a hostile world? We'll uncover the final, horrifying piece of evidence that reveals exactly who they were eating and what it means for the dark side of our own DNA, right after we examine the true cost of survival. We left off with a terrifying question. Who exactly were the victims of these ancient butchers? When scientists analyzed the DNA from the shattered skulls and hollowed-out femurs in Gough's cave, the truth made their blood run cold. They weren't enemy combatants from a rival tribe. They weren't strangers hunted down in the snow. The remains belonged to a 3-year-old child, 2 adolescents, and 2 adults. They were a family unit. They were their own people. But consuming your own kind comes with a catastrophic biological price, a price that history calls the laughing death and science calls a prion disease. In the 20th century, a tribe in Papua New Guinea known as the Four People experienced a horrifying epidemic. Members of the tribe would lose control of their limbs, suffer severe tremors, and burst into uncontrollable manic bouts of laughter before ultimately dying. The cause? a fatal, incurable brain disease called kuru. And how did they get it? Through ritualistic cannibalism. The four people practiced mortuary cannibalism, eating their deceased relatives as a sign of respect. But by eating human brains infected with misfolded proteins called prions, they were essentially consuming a biological time bomb. Prions are practically indestructible. You can cook the meat, you can boil the bone marrow, but the prions survive. Once ingested, they turn your brain into a microscopic sponge, eating away at your nervous system until you literally lose your mind and die. The twist, the dark secret in our DNA. This brings us to the ultimate terrifying paradox of human evolution. If eating human flesh is a biological death sentence, and early humans were doing it thousands of years ago in places like Gough's cave, how are we still here? Why didn't prion diseases wipe out our ancestors completely? The answer is hiding inside your own cells right now. In 2003, geneticists from University College London conducted a massive global study on human DNA and found a mutation that shook the scientific community to its core. They discovered a specific alteration on the PRNP gene, a polymorphism at codon 129. What does this mutation do? It acts as a biological shield. It literally alters the shape of your brain's proteins, making it nearly impossible for the deadly cannibal prions to attach and multiply. It is an evolutionary defense mechanism designed specifically to protect you from the fatal consequences of eating infected human brains. Now, here is where the science gets truly disturbing. The researchers didn't just find this mutation in a few isolated tribes. They found it everywhere. It is deeply embedded in the genetic code of modern populations across the globe, from Europe to Asia to the Americas. In evolutionary biology, a genetic mutation only becomes this widespread if natural selection absolutely demands it. You don't develop a universal immunity to a cannibal disease unless your ancestors were exposed to that disease constantly, not for a few years, not just during a bad winter, but continuously over hundreds of thousands of years. The butchers of Gough's cave weren't an isolated incident. They weren't a freak anomaly caused by desperation in the Ice Age. The genetic evidence proves that human cannibalism wasn't the exception. It was the rule. It was a standard, everyday reality of early human life. We didn't just eat our enemies to steal their power. We didn't just eat our families to absorb their souls. Our ancestors hunted, butchered, and consumed each other so often and for so long that the human body had to literally rewrite its own genetic code just to survive our insatiable hunger for human flesh. The terrifying truth of the Ice Age isn't just that we were monsters when the snow fell and the food ran out. The truth is that we are the descendants of the cannibals who survived the feast. The genetic ghosts of those brutal, blood-soaked rituals are still circulating in your veins today. If history books lied to you about the true nature of human survival, what other dark secrets are buried in our past? Hit the subscribe button right now to join the investigation. And I want you to tell me in the comments below, if the next Ice Age hit tomorrow and the grocery stores went completely empty, how long do you think it would take for humanity to revert back to its original menu? Stay curious, stay vigilant.